Hi guys, happy Friday. Been a busy week again with interviews. Be heading to Tennessee in the US in 2 and a bit weeks for Miss Volunteer America. Looking forward to that, getting out of the cold weather here in Sydney and going to a warm summer. Hopefully not too warm, it might be a bit of a shock to the system over in the US and catching up with a couple of people over there that I haven't seen for a long time or I've never actually seen it all, and maybe they are just figments of my imagination. The joys of being an online interviewer. I didn't really want to talk about this today, talking about what's happening with Miss Grand International, but I had other things planned to talk about, but I feel that as a responsible content creator, I'm supposed to be talking about stuff that's topical. At least that's what my business coach told me. And so if you don't know, basically, Miss Grand, depending on who you believe, the former now, the title holder, Rachel Gupta, I think her name is. Apologies, I don't follow Miss Grand very closely. But the title holder resigned, or if you believe Miss Grand International, they fired her. It's gotten very ugly. She has put up a YouTube video explaining her side of it. It's about an hour long. I haven't watched it because I really don't want to go too deep into this. Suffice to say, I think most people seem to be taking her side in this. Not to say that that proves that what she's saying is true. What I really objectively dislike is the way that the Miss Grand organization is airing all their dirty laundry in public, showing emails which really should be confidential and putting them up on their social media and trying to prove that, they fired her, she didn't resign, we fired her. And it just seems very petty. I will say, in full honesty, I've never been the biggest fan of Miss Grand on an international level. I've had multiple now negative interactions with it myself, or people that I know have had negative interactions with it. I think the idea that you can have a pageant and you're somehow going to stop war is a farce. Yeah, and the big thing that does my head in is that they say they're about stopping war and stopping violence, and then when the girls go on stage in a bikini, what do they flash up? Their measurements. Yes, that's going to stop war and violence. How? I don't know. Someone must be much more intelligent than me can figure this out. But I've also had. I was coaching a former Australian title holder. She said the first thing when she got over there that she was told was that they were there to be seen and not heard. I've also been told by multiple girls who've competed there themselves that the director, or whatever he calls himself, plays favorites and is not ashamed about it. And then on another level, I've had negative interactions with the Miss Grand organization here in my own country of Australia. Now, full disclosure, it's under different directorship now, but it's let's say it's not it's not my favorite pageant. I really feel that to each their own. But I think if you're someone who's in pageants for the advocacy side of it, Miss Grand would be very, very low on your list. Let's just put it that way. I also want to say and again, I haven't delved too deeply into this because it really is a cesspit. Look at the comments and it's just, I can't believe people have time to post some of the stuff they're posting. Regardless of who you believe, here's my point, okay? If the title holder was being troublesome, etc., and they decided to fire her, okay, it does happen. I'm not going to say that never happens. I know directors firsthand who have told me they've dealt with title holders who have become extremely troublesome, and they've had to be gotten rid of. And then they've gone on tirades on social media making up lies. So I'm not going to say, believe title holders all the time. But regardless of whether the title holder was being difficult or at fault, or regardless of whether it's the system at fault and they've mismanaged her, abused her, breached contract, whatever it is. Here's the thing, at the end of the day, I don't look at isolated incidents because you and I can never really know what happened, can we? We can't. That's why I feel like debating this sort of thing is kind of pointless, because you won't know, I won't know what really went on behind the scenes, and every story has two sides. But you can look at patterns. And if something happens again and again and again, it's like that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. If you look at the number of controversies that the Grand organization has been involved in, some of the previous behavior of the director, and you look at, this is not the first time someone has been decrowned or dethroned from the Grand organization. And if that happens again and again, you got to think, okay, something's a little bit off here. And look, the organization is well within their rights to dethrone someone if they breach contract. But here's a question I want you to ask yourself. Who was responsible for picking that person as their title holder? I mean, and I love the post that's just come up now, and something about like, oh, the crown's made its way to the true queen. And I'm like, if that was the truly deserving queen and the truly deserving winner, why did you crown someone else in the first place? Like, is it just me that's confused by that? But if you are habitually picking as your title holder people that then need to be fired because they're troublesome or they breach contract, what on earth does that say about your judging criteria? Like, something obviously is not measuring up. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this is specifically when it happens again, and it's not like a one-time occurrence. Any system can have problems with a troublesome title holder, and any title holder can come up against a troublesome director. But I think this situation has a lot of resemblance to what happened with Noelia Voigt and the Miss USA system. I'm not the only person to think that. And I think the weight of sentiment is on the title holder's side. Again, that doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, regardless of who you believe, I really think the way that the Miss Grand organization is behaving in this whole debacle, very childish, very petty. And let's say I'm just glad I'm not the holder of the Miss Grand Australia franchise at the moment. But on a deeper level, I wanted to I wanted to share some of the difficult moments that I've had, because I don't often talk about these, and then maybe give you some things that have worked for myself and some things that really haven't worked for myself in dealing with these types of situations. By no means as big as what's going on with Miss Grand at the moment, but similar. And I will say, the first big issue that I had, the first big trouble I had, was over here in Australia. And there was a system running over here in Australia. It doesn't run anymore, but it was leading to an international pageant to be held in the United States. Now, for whatever reason, the international director was deciding to play favorites or something like I don't really care. The ins and outs of it don't really matter. But this all came to a head because he was favoring some title holders over others, and it was one of those weird ones where, well, not weird, but one of those situations where you have like an Australia title holder, and then you have an Oceania title holder, and like you could have an Australasia title holder, and so you kind of have three girls or multiple girls who are all from Australia kind of competing for the same international crown. And he had his favorites out of that. That's fine. If you want to do that, you do that. But he went on social media, and you may want to cover your ears if you don't like curse words. He called one of his title holders at that time who was competing, and I still have the screenshot to this day. I believe he called her verbatim a slut and a whore. And he deleted her from one of the posts and said, "I deleted a whore." And this was on his social media. Now, what was really bizarre about this whole thing was that I, at the time, had a friend who was competing for that system. And when I brought this up, she was trying to excuse it by saying, "Oh, yeah, but you have to understand he's gay. That's just the way he acts." And I'm like, no, I know, I understand now that, you want the crown. That doesn't excuse that sort of behavior. Nothing excuses that kind of behavior. And it was really weird because also in that organization, the person who actually won the Australia title resigned. And then my friend got to pick up the crown afterwards. So she was then crowned. And it's like, this is again, like, reminiscent of the Grand situation. Like, if there's one incident, it's one incident. But if there's a lot of things going on, as I said, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I watched this whole thing play out. There were accusations of abuse at the international pageant, someone getting pushed. It was a debacle. And see, that was really my rude awakening, if you will, to this very plain fact, this idea that pageantry isn't all sunshine and roses. It's really not. It's not to say it's all negative, but the reality lies somewhere in between. And what's really harmful is if we put our heads in the sand and pretend that the bad stuff doesn't happen, because then you guys as a contestants are ill prepared to deal with it when it does happen. But that was really the first big blow up. There was another blow up around, for myself personally, around COVID, to do with Miss Grand again, because Miss Grand during COVID wanted to hold one of its editions in Venezuela. Now, this was at the height of COVID, when you were only supposed to travel for absolute necessity. And I'm sorry, as big as a pageant fan you might be, pageants are not a necessity. Sending medical supplies and, vaccinations and medical personnel, that's a necessity. Holding a pageant is not. The other thing was that Venezuela, it was basically don't go to Venezuela. Because I was talking in the UK at the time. I was running a podcast in the UK. And the UK embassy basically had Venezuela on this list where it's not only are we suggesting it's dangerous to go over there, but only go over there, it's absolutely necessary. And oh, by the way, we don't even have an embassy there. So if something, if it hits the fan, you're on your own. And I was reading these stories of people being kidnapped in Venezuela. But look, I'm sure the people are lovely. This is not, I would never slag of a whole country. But I was kind of alarmed by this, because what was happening was, in the UK, the Grand franchise had just been taken over by a new person. No one knew who it was. They hadn't announced who it was. And suddenly they announced they were going to be sending girls in the middle of COVID to Venezuela, which was on the no-fly list. And I was like, kind of worried about this. I did a live video where I'm saying, I just want, no harm, no foul. I'm not saying that the person who's taken over Grand is unqualified. But I think it would be good to get some clarity around this. Like, does this person have the expertise necessary to send 3 girls in the middle of COVID? I think it was 3, because UK is multiple countries, but send multiple girls over to Venezuela, which is a no-fly zone. Like, don't go there. And you're going to send them in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I'm just worried. I basically said I'm worried. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be sending them. I'm not saying they're ill-prepared, but you haven't announced who you are. Like, I'm concerned, because worst thing comes to worst, those girls are going to end up in a lot of trouble. And I did that. I've watched this video back so many times, that video that I did, and it was very even-handed. I wasn't flaking off. I was just asking for some clarification. Now, some of my UK friends at the time got it in their head that it was their time to go on a quest and basically go and bully and, bash, verbally, not physically, basically take it as some crusade, that they had to uncover who the director was, and they gave the person a hard time. And they shouldn't have done that, but I didn't tell them to do that at all. I never suggested it. And they went, I think, too far. And so the director, when she did finally announce who she was, she wasn't really qualified. She was a complete newbie, and I think she had the franchise for a total of 1 year, then it was taken away from her or something like that. But, so it didn't go well. I don't think they ever ended up sending anyone there. I forget the ins and outs of it. But what happened was, those friends of mine, or people who had been following me, went too far and made it a crusade. I never wanted it to be crusade. All I wanted was to make sure the girls going over were going to be safe. But because these people had gone too far, and the director felt she had been bullied, one of the other pageant pages over in the UK, bless their hearts, and the person who founded it, had always been low-key jealous of me, because I had done better in the UK in terms of viewership and who I'd gotten to interview than she had. And I'm in Australia and she's in the UK. I could always tell she was jealous. She was a bit of an odd duck. Let's just say that. And she got it in her head that she was now going to go on a crusade and label me a bully. And so she started an anti-bullying campaign targeted against me for the actions of other people Like, I hadn't done anything. I made one video saying, can we get some clarification? I'm concerned. And suddenly I was being called a bully because apparently, well, I don't know. It made no sense. Like, it was one of those things when you read it and go like, hang on, like, what are you talking about? I can't even debate this with you because what you're saying makes no sense. And so I became the target of an anti-bullying campaign, which was great. And here's one of the things that I did, which I'm going to say I learned from. I didn't really know what to do because I'm not someone who likes lies. I'm not someone who likes to be lied about in public and then have that person get away with it and think they're really smart and think that they're, holier than thou. They're on some crusade and aren't they great and aren't they just the savior of everyone? And so I made a response video. It was very cutting and direct and quite sarcastic and pretty cutting. There was no swearing, but I didn't like what had been said, and so I made it almost like a stand-up comic routine about the whole thing. I remember specifically because she had said that to me that I didn't know anything about pageants, and which was interesting given that I had interviewed a lot more people than her and she hadn't won any major title whatsoever. I think it was only her first or second pageant. So it's like, okay. And I said, okay, I may know nothing about pageants, but at least I know how to spell it, because she, in her branding, had the word pageant and she had misspelt it as Pageant. She'd forgot the N, so it was Pageat. And so, okay, I may know nothing about pageants, but at least I can spell it. And so the video was full of little barbs like that. And I thought it was really funny, but it was a step too far. And so I took it down pretty much straight away. And I learned from that, because even though I felt within my rights to respond, I shouldn't have responded in that way. On reflection, I should have responded, and this is what Grand should have done, is responded with, if you disagree with the person, say, I just want to take a public announcement. I categorically disagree with what's being stated. Sincerely, or yours truly, Adrian Kwan, founder of the Pageant Project, or whatever it is. You don't put anything out more than that. It's just not worth it, and it shows you in a really bad light. And that's if you need to make a public statement. And by the way, sometimes you do, because if you say nothing, it's taken as a sign of guilt. That, not in the legal sense, but in the court of public opinion. So that's what I should have done. I should have just made a statement like, I categorically disagree with blah, 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 blah. You can quote some things if you want to and say, I have always done this, 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 and this. But you don't name and shame. You don't even make really a legal argument. You just, refute the argument and make it as objective as possible. In this day and age, you could use ChatGPT to do that very, very easily for you. So that's something that I learned a lot from, because even though I had the great experience of having a whole anti-bullying campaign targeted against me for doing absolutely nothing, I wasn't really ever able to refute it, because I was bigger than this person. And so the people who knew me anyway, knew that I hadn't bullied anyone, because I don't bully people. It's just not what I would want to do ever. That's like the furthest thing. If you've interacted with me, the furthest thing from me would be to want to go and bully someone. But also, bullying is defined as when I looked this up during my research to do the video. To qualify as bullying, one of the things that needs to be there is a mismatch of power. Basically, you can only bully down. You can never bully up. And so if you're being attacked by someone who is smaller than you, in a following sense, I'm not talking in like in the eyes of God or anything, but if you're being attacked by someone who's smaller than you, you really can't punch back, because if you're bigger than them and you're punching down, it's an ugly look. And so I sort of had to learn to, not get my ego under control, but I certainly had to not let ego get in the way. And I just had to basically let that one slide, because the people who mattered knew who I was. And the people who supported that, I will say, the people who supported that bullying campaign, I just never spoke to them again. If I had interviewed them in the past, I removed their interviews, because I'm well within my rights to do that. But suffice to say, I know sometimes what it's like to be the target of online hate when it's completely undeserved and it doesn't make any kind of sense. But my point with that one was that I was there to advocate for the safety of the girls going to a war zone in the middle of a pandemic. I never thought I would become the target of a bullying campaign from that. But, but there are certain ways to respond, and responding in public is a very dangerous idea. If you're going to make any personal attacks or anything like that, I would just say point blank, do not do it. Don't do it. If you need to make a public statement, you make it objectively as you can, you leave it at that, and then people will. The court of public opinion is a very weird thing, and one day things will be news and then the next day it'll be forgotten anyway. But it's difficult. If you have a sense of right and wrong, kind of like I do, that's one of the things with me, is that I have a very, very set sense, and this can be a drawback as well, of what's right and what's wrong. And when someone's doing something that I think is wrong, I don't want them to get away with it. And in this case, I needed to, because, again, you don't want to punch down. It's not a good look, and you just shouldn't do it. That was a learning curve for me. And then obviously, you have situations like what happened with Noelia Voigt and Miss USA and Uma Sophia. That got very ugly. I was also involved indirectly in a couple of legal cases, sort of offering advice to girls who were considering, or title holders, who were considering taking legal action against their directors because things had just gone so pear-shaped. And again, so here's the thing. I've already told you, don't respond to things in public. When it comes to contracts, this is a really big thing. If you are going to, before you sign any contract, please get legal advice on it. If you cannot, or you cannot afford it because it does cost, at least run it through ChatGPT and ask it to analyze for potential points of friction or conflict or things that look quasi-unfair. Because I will tell you, this is Confessions of a Pageant King, I was friends with the international title holder of one of the biggest pageants, one of the biggest environmentally themed pageants in the world. And she was having a horrid time of it. It was like, talk about poison, the crown becoming a poison chalice. The director was abusive emotionally, verbally, not only to her, but to her parents. Her mother in particular, who's the sweetest woman on earth, got to the point where every day she was basically crying, and every time she got a message from her director, she was anxious about it because she didn't know whether she was going to be called stupid or lazy or what have you. And so we started looking at the contract just to see if there was some way to get out of it, because there was breaches of contract. And I kid you not, when I looked at this thing looked like it had been penned by a fourth grader. It was terrible. There were grammatical mistakes everywhere, spelling mistakes everywhere. I don't know who put it together. But there were things in there that really no sane person should really have signed. Now, in defense of my friend, I don't think she had really read it, and I don't know if she realized she had a choice. But there were phrases in there like, any work she got over the next year, the international pageant would get to take a cut of. And that's all it said. Now, if you're thinking about it, that also means stuff that my friend had gotten from her own work. So even it had nothing to do with the pageant, and she was an actress. So if she had landed a part in a Hollywood movie and it had nothing to do with the pageant was stating, well, we get to take, a big percentage of that. And I was like, that's not right. And I wouldn't have signed that. And so really looking at your contract and your NDAs, if you have to sign them, before you sign them, make sure you have someone look over them. And the third thing I'll say on this is keep records of everything. Everything. And I'm not saying this because now you're going to show it on public, on social media. As I already said, I think that's a terrible idea to do any of this in public. But so much of pageantry, so many of these arguments is, he said, she said, he said, she said. And I'm like, I don't care about any of that. All you need is one screenshot, one email. Keep all the emails, keep all your contracts, keep all the conversations, keep all the screenshots, because then all you need to back yourself up is screenshot, like if it does get to that legal stage, or when you're going back and forth with someone and you're having a heated debate, let's call it, and they're saying, you did this. You just say, well, and again, be completely like robotic about this. It's very difficult, I understand. Don't get personal about it. And just say, in response to your email, I'm attaching the following screenshot of a message from XYZ date. and that screenshot shows them saying something completely contradictory to what they're claiming that you said or they said in the email. Do you understand? So I didn't want to say, do you understand? Of course you understand, sorry. But I'm having sort of memories of how terrible some people behave in public and how contradictory they are in private as compared to what they are in public. But keep records of everything. Keep a paper trail. It's very easy in your inbox. If it's an email, have a folder and just keep all your correspondence in there. All the other conversations, keep screenshots of them. Again, not because you're going to show them in public, but you just never know when it's going to come in handy. And if it does ever get to a legal situation, court, God forbid, all you need is one screenshot, an actual record, because otherwise it's going to be, he said, she said, and you just don't want to go into a legal case when that's going to happen, because it's going to be very long, it's going to be very drawn out, and it's going to be very, very expensive. And I've had multiple times when I've been dragged into cases like these, and often it's the directors who are doing something that's a bit underhanded, or they breach contract. And I had one situation with another environmental pageant over here in Australia, and I had basically all of the contestants on a group call with me because they were all so unhappy with what had gone on, and the directors really hadn't delivered on what they said they were going to, and had made one of the girls in particular look very bad. Because she had gotten sponsorship from a trusted connection of hers, and the deal was in return for that sponsorship, they would get a placement in the magazine, and then came time for the pageant, and the magazine never materialized. So it made this girl look really bad. And then the magazine eventually materialized, but like 2 or 3 months after the pageant. It's like, normally you don't have the pageant program come out 3 months after the fact, but okay. And so these girls were looking again at legal recourse. And what was really helpful in that setting was a record of all the conversations. And I will tell you, when you see some of these conversations, as I was privy to, it's pretty jarring, because some of the things that these people are saying in private, they not like to be nice in public, but in private they are really, really nasty, and again, it's very, very jarring. And look, the point of this video is not to, not to shock you or anything like that. It's just to bring awareness to the fact. And I'm doing this because I've interviewed, coming up on 300 pageant interviews, and I did about 50 or so interviews before that. After having spoken to so many pageant contestants from around the world, and having all the conversations after the fact, when the cameras go off, so to speak, and hearing everything under the sun, because I'm a neutral party. There aren't many, I don't know if there's anyone left like me in the pageant industry who's not a director, is not a title holder, is not none of those things. I'm just neutral, I'm just me. And so I get everything. I don't ask for it, but people feel like they can trust me. And so I get everything. And that's actually pretty jarring on my mental health, I'm going to be honest. But I need you to be aware that certain things do happen, and I need you to be prepared for them, so that if they do happen, I know that you can handle it, and handle it well to the best of your ability. And so, as I said, I've said a few things, like, don't handle any of this in public. It's a bad idea. If you need to make a public statement, it's completely objective. You write it like a robot. Get ChatGPT to do it for you. Something along the lines of, I categorically refute, or I refute the statements, or I refute these allegations, and that's it. You don't even have to go into the why. You just say you refute them, and people go, okay, then you're not agreeing with it tacitly, silently. Okay. The other one, as I said, keep a paper trail. Keep a paper trail of absolutely everything. Keep a record, keep the emails, keep the conversations, keep screenshots, because if push comes to shove, very often it's so easy to prove something is true or false just going off the paper record. You don't have to talk about it. Just say, you say whatever you want. Here's what you said in the message. Here's a screenshot. And then it's funny, you watch how silent they get. As I said, with the whole anti-bullying campaign against me, sometimes you do just have to bite your lip. It's kind of unfortunate. And again, if you're like me and you don't want to see people doing the wrong thing and getting away with it, it can be really a test. It can feel extremely unfair, and it is unfair. But it's the smarter thing to not stir it up. because it then just comes back to bite you. And that's one of the things people often go, oh, should I respond or not? If you're going to respond, it's a public statement route. Otherwise, you just don't do anything. And I will say that just the final thought on this: be honest, be a nice person, and don't be manipulative. Because what happens in pageantry in particular, the circle is so small. If you're like that, you're going to get found out eventually. It's going to come back around. I've seen this happen time and time and time again. And again, like with Miss Grand, it was interesting. One of the women was decrowned, and then someone else took the throne. And this was right when I begun my pageant career, and everyone was pointing out to her and saying, "Oh, she's Miss Grand so and so." So I thought she had won the crown. Strangely, no one mentioned the fact that she actually hadn't won. That she was actually the first runner-up, but she got the crown because the other one had been dethroned. And I subsequently had dealings with the woman who was dethroned, and I found it very warm, very friendly, very professional. Whereas the one who got the crown, the first runner-up originally, she was on video having bullied people for not speaking English. And she wasn't that nice of a person. And so the final thing with all of this is everything is permanent, everything is on record, especially in this day with social media and everyone having a phone camera. You got to be honest. Don't bullshit people, because it will get found out. It will come back around. And as much as word spread sometimes and it's unfair, I would be more you have to have good moral character, because if you can stand by that, you can confidently go into a room and know that whatever, I'm not a perfect person, but whatever I've done with good intentions and tried to make the best decision that I could. I've never tried to put one past someone. I've never tried to do something underhanded or illegal. I've never breached a contract. It's just so much easier to go into a room with your head held high. Doesn't mean everyone's going to like you, but you've got that respect for yourself to know, if I walk in that room, I know that I haven't cheated anyone, I haven't shortchanged anyone, I haven't breached contract, I haven't been difficult, I have stood up for myself, but I've done it in a very respectful way, and I've got all the records and receipts to prove it. I think that's the final piece of it. Like, if you are doing underhanded stuff and then you get found out, and then you are in an argument with someone else who's also done some underhanded stuff, then it just gets really stupid and really ridiculous and ugly, because you both get found out then, and the court of public opinion will not be very kind to you. But I like to think that if you do have a good moral character, eventually the truth will out. And I remember this because, again, I'll close on this story. This is actually not a pageant one, but I remember when I was leaving my position as head tennis coach, I was actually let go in very unfair circumstances. They said it was because I hadn't signed the contract. And I told them I haven't signed the contract because it's got errors in it, multiple mistakes. You said that I'm responsible for this, this, and this, and I'm not. And I told them I'm not going to sign it when it's incorrect. And they said, oh, just sign it, we'll fix it later. No, no, we're not doing that. But they wanted to get rid of me because they wanted to play favorites. And it was interesting because the person who wanted to get rid of me was the head of PE at the school. And then he took over the tennis program. Like instantly overnight, it shrunk. And then like 3 months later, he was let go because apparently he'd been having relations with someone who was underage. So yeah, good going, guys. But I remember from that, when I was walking out, like for probably the last time, I bumped into one of the other PE teachers who I'd never really spoken to, like got along just fine, but never been really close with. And she said, oh, I'm really going to miss you because you're always such a gentleman. See, that's quite moving, isn't it? Because that goes beyond, oh, I'll miss you, or you were nice, like gentlemen. So this idea that you do things in a certain way, with a certain level of manner and respect for everyone, even if they're difficult and they don't treat you so well, you give them the benefit of the doubt with the understanding that, it's not for me to judge them, God or whatever you believe in, that it's up to them to judge that person. And so that's what I want for you as well, is to hold yourself to a high standard. It's going to be difficult, and frankly, yes, it will sometimes feel that it's unfair. really, really unfair. And there are going to be a lot of people who probably don't understand it because a lot of people are thick as two planks. Like, if you imagine, take the grand situation one more time. If you imagine, just for a second, hypothetically, okay, I'm not taking sides, I don't want to take sides. But if you imagine that the title holder is telling the truth, can you imagine how she feels now, seeing all these people celebrating that the person who's now taken the crown has taken the crown and that she's the real queen? And seeing the system that crowned her previously, and she was so happy to receive the crown, is now saying that the one who's replaced her was the true queen all along. And then all these pageant fans, this is why I can't stand the term pageant fan, and pageant critics are chiming in and saying, oh yeah, this is the true queen, deserving queen. And can you imagine? And like, we're supposed to be doing better about mental health. This is better. Again, this is why I'm talking to you. You need to have the skill set to handle this, because I don't rely on any system or any director, frankly, to do this for you. It's dangerous. You don't outsource your mental health. And so I hope some of these pointers, you take them to heart and start doing them. If you're doing them all great, that's great. If you actually have some other ones, please let me know, like things that you do to make sure you're covering all your bases so that you're never going to be blindsided. Because I think those things really need to be stated. You don't want them, for example, with the whole Miss USA, with the whole Noelia situation, and then NDAs come to light, and now we're suddenly discussing NDAs. That's great, but it would have been better if we had discussed it beforehand. And there's a multitude of things that I can go on about that really irk me when it comes to pageantry and like quasi-legal things. Like sometimes when you go to an international pageant and they take your passport, I'm like, and it's not to photocopy it, it's to take it. They take it and put it in a safe. I'm like, when I heard that, I was shocked. I was like, you're not taking my passport. No way. That's my identity in a foreign country. You're not taking that. I don't care. Like, and if you won't let me compete, I'm not competing. And sometimes you do have to do that. That's the courage it takes to do the right thing. If you don't agree with it, and the only leverage they have on you is, well, you don't get to compete, walk out that door. It ain't worth it. Don't let these petty dictator tyrant wannabes get away with it. It's not like they don't have leverage over you. I promise you, bigger and better things are waiting for you than a shim sham of a flim flam pageant. Just don't do it. But yeah, if you have any things that you do to cover your bases, please let me know, because I'd love to sort of put together a little kit for people when they're going into pageantry. Just say, hey, make sure you've done this. This is like the safety checklist. To make sure you're covering your bases. So things like this, hopefully, like some of the experience I've had, hopefully they happen a lot less. I don't think it's ever going to get to a point where it doesn't happen at all. It's just the way us humans are. We're deeply flawed, myself included, especially. But if we could decrease, the toxicity, the decrowning, the he said, she said, the pageant gossip, I'd be okay with that.